So as you know, we have 2 WhatsApp groups. So we do our best to ensure we send the very same information on both groups, okay? So do not feel Uguti if you are in one group, then you will not be receiving any information. We will be responding. The groups are, at the moment, you are not allowed to send messages via groups. When the groups are open to send messages, feel free to send messages, but obviously it has to be written in a respectful manner. And you must allow for us to be able to respond timelessly, okay? Sometimes you may not be able to respond on time. Please don't see that as us ignoring you. It's because we have other responsibilities as well, but we will do our best to ilanga lingashoni singabhekanga, meaning that we'll do our best that we respond to ngalelo suku sendele ngayo, okay? So Mr. Kulusa will be taking you through in theme 1, theme 2, and theme 3. I will be coming through the second term where I'll be taking you guys through theme 4 to theme 7 or 8. Okay. So in terms of our rules and regulations, our lectures 8, you have to attend. If you can't, it's okay, but we advise that you attend. We will be uploading our recordings via Learn. We will be sending all necessary information via emails as well as WhatsApp. But we do encourage you to learn, but we do understand we would say data linking, connectivity is an issue, hence we do our best to record lectures. And you need to also be mindful of the fact that as much as ingas and connectivity as students, we as lecturers at times also experience similar issues. It could be due to our locations. We all know which we are constantly having power challenges. So it's all those things that could also affect our connectivity. So it's important that you understand, Uguti Masite, we are going to have a Zoom class. It's because we anticipate no power shortages or technical issues. But if it does happen that we say Uguti Sizobane Zoom class and we end up not having it, please do understand that the challenges are not only on your side. From time to time, we also experience similar challenges. So as much as possible, we'll do our best to record, but we have had issues where we have recorded our Zoom classes and due to technical issues, we cannot download them. So we'll do our best on our side to minimize all those risks. But where possible, please do attend and participate, okay? In terms of our assessments for this semester and for this module, you'll be having a long essay, okay? Our assessment dates will be communicated. We will tell you at least 2 weeks in advance, okay? So we'll not be telling you today what to submit next week. You have at least 2 weeks. We will guide you on how we are expecting the essays to be written and how you'll be graded or how your essays will be marked, okay? You'll be having 2 tests. The first one will be an MCQ. We all know what MCQs are, multiple choice questions. These will be done online via Learn, and you will also have a take-home exam, which will be a research scenario. Okay, these may change, but the weighting of the assessments will remain. So if it happens that you end up doing 3 MCQs, no, Uguti, that was what was decided due to technical issues perhaps that you may be having or any other challenges that you may be experiencing. But as much as possible, we are hoping to get 2 written assessments from you, which will be in a form of a long essay as well as a take-home exam. So the first assessment, which will be the long essay, will be 30% of your overall mark. The second one, which will be your MCQ, will be 30%, and the final one will be 40%. Okay, we will ensure that we test you on all the sections at the end. So your final exam could just be a research scenario that where you have to engage with all the different sections that we would have taught you. So that's the most important part. Do you guys have any questions with regards to your assessment at the moment? Okay, I take it we do not have any questions, but if you do have questions, you will have an opportunity to send them via WhatsApp. Mr. Kulusa will guide you in terms of selecting a class rep. We'll have 2 class reps, 1 for each WhatsApp group. So it's important to ensure that we have my class reps for each of the groups. Okay. And then all your concerns, you can just raise them with your class reps. And as already mentioned, all information will be shared to you mostly via WhatsApp, but we do understand there are people who have no access to WhatsApp, so we will be emailing, okay? We are very sensitive towards your connectivity issues. We are very sensitive in terms of with the fact that not everyone has access to the internet or sometimes even basic network. So we will do our best to ensure even in terms of our submission dates, we are as understanding as possible. But yeah, it is important for you to ensure you do everything that is expected of you so that you pass this module. It's a wonderful module. You learn a lot. You will learn how to be sensitive to other people and also to be sensitive to people's health and cultural related issues. So I wish you the best for this term where you will be with Mr. Kulusa. You are in capable hands. He's a wonderful colleague. If you have any issues, do email him. If you feel Uguti Sape, he may not be able to, no, he will always be able to respond to your questions. But if it's an issue regarding Mr. Kulusa, which I do not think will happen, you may just direct them to me. And if it's an issue regarding Dr. Nzuza, you can just direct them to Mr. Kulusa. We are colleagues, we do share information. So the information that you get from him is most likely what you would get from me. So ningazami ukushaya ukhulume nalo ukhulume nalo ngoba uzongazisa ukhuluse kanjalo nami ngizobe ngimazisile ukuthi bese ngithe. So nginifisela okuhle for le section azonifundisa kona and nginifisela okuhle ngiyazi ukuthi nonke nizophumelela. Mr. Kulusa, sengiqedile on my side.
Okay, Doctor, thank you. Okay, welcome again to Anthropology 201. This is your first lecture. I'm going to be sharing my screen, beginning of our section. It's about medical anthropology. What you need to understand is whatever we try to teach you is reflected on your test. So you don't need to cut corners and just go through the slides. You must make sure that you go through your readings. These are recommended readings, all of these. Each theme has particular readings that you need to go through. Okay, so by the end of this module, you will understand the origins of medical anthropology, where you will understand the context of the discipline, understanding the definitions that accompany along with this medical anthropology, the contributions of medical anthropology. You'll also be able to understand the methods that are important, that are used by medical anthropologists to discover and understand particular illness and diseases. Okay, you'll also be able to grasp why is medical anthropology relevant. We understand that we've been dealing with COVID-19 as an issue. We've also been able to deal with HIV and AIDS over the past few years. We've dealt with Ebola. So you see, with this 20th century, medical anthropology remains relevant. It remains important in solving issues that are accompanying the issues of diseases, illness, and also the issues that affect people through illness. Okay, you'll also understand the theoretical approaches in medical anthropology. You'll understand the theoretical approaches to medical anthropology. Okay, so what are the learning outcomes? Students will be able to understand the historical origins of medical anthropology. As I've mentioned before, it has been relevant since the 19th century. All of you, or most of you, understand that the 19th century French Revolution was the beginning of industrialization. So for medical anthropology to be introduced at a later stage meant that they were not able to deal with the socio-economic causes of illness that were affecting people during that time. Okay, so continuing, the learning outcomes will also be based on you being able to define the important concepts that are accompanied by medical anthropology. You'll be introduced to theory of medical anthropology and the reasons behind outbreaks. As I've made examples of Ebola, Ebola was an outbreak. It did happen. It affected a lot of North African countries, even if it didn't reach the southern parts. But it did reach many North African countries and many European countries. That is for you to also note the significant role, the context nature or the contextual nature of medical anthropology, the dynamics of medical anthropology, the relevance of medical anthropology, and also the approaches that are associated with diagnosing and also understanding and tracing sickness and illness that affect particular social groups. So for you as a medical anthropologist or as a student in the medical anthropology, you need to also be familiar with the concepts and the theories of medical anthropology. Okay, introduction to medical anthropology. Okay, for you to understand medical anthropology, it's important for you to be able to define and understand anthropology as a field, because it becomes a subfield of anthropology, that is medical anthropology. And most of you have been present since last year. You would note that we were able to define anthropology, understanding anthropology, defining it as a study of humankind. It becomes a study of humankind because of its holistic nature, its diverse focus. Whilst medical anthropology focuses on the social cultural causes of illness, applied anthropology focuses on applying the same anthropological methods in social reality, which means they directly confront illness through fieldwork research, that is applied anthropology. And we also spoke about archaeology as a field of anthropology and biological anthropology. So for you to understand that we call this the study of humankind, you need to also note that it is because of its holistic nature, which means it allows you to study beyond what you are seeing, beyond the social issue that you are seeing. It goes beyond understanding individual interaction, but also it extends to understanding group interaction, which is where illness and disease can emerge from. We understand the increase in population has also introduced some of the major problems. We understand that with many people, we have many diseases. And through if you can look at the past 30 years, from perhaps 1990, you will understand there have been many outbreaks. There have been many outbreaks affecting people, which has resulted in sickness, which have also influenced people to be very ill. So for you to understand medical anthropology, you need to also understand anthropology as a study of humankind. Oh, moving on. Anthropology extends the reach of critical inquiry to the lived experiences. As I've mentioned, it goes beyond understanding individual group, but also understanding groups, cultural groups, and also understanding issues that affect these cultural groups, which then gives them the ability to generate social solutions, and also understanding the structural vulnerabilities those groups are facing. Anthropology as a discipline allows us to understand and make sense of the complexities of culture. Complexities of culture, yes, complexities of culture. African culture is rich, it's very diverse. For many years, European researchers have contradicted the scope of African culture. They did not understand African culture. They used religion, Western religion in particular, to understand African culture, which also presented issues in them lacking the insider view perspective, which was also resulted from them understanding us as barbarians, or even sometimes understanding us as a nation that did not think critically enough, that did not understand the world as they did. So that is where the complexities of culture emerge from, because African culture is diverse, and African culture in particular is gendered. And in as much as it is gendered, it is also a very, very fluid aspect, because if you go to the north of Africa, you will find that people do things differently. If you go to the south, you'll find that people in Africa do things differently. If you go to the west as well, you'll understand that people in Africa, they also engage in different things. They approach things differently, because culture is learned, culture is shared, which is the scope of anthropology, understanding the complexities of culture. Over the past years, anthropologists have attempted to understand HIV from a cultural perspective. And some of the Western ethnographers have said African culture is toxic. It produces elements of patriarchy. It also exacerbates HIV and AIDS, which resulted in many questions, because African culture might be in that way, but there are other good aspects about it. For example, they said culture is toxic because of masculinity that accompanies with polygamy. Polygamy results in unprotected sex. It also results in women and having less negotiation terms in the marriage, because a man will say, I'm a man, I'm supposed to have 2 wives. A man is supposed to do this. So you will understand that that is where the complexities of culture came from. So for the modern anthropologists to understand these complexities, they are required to be having the insider knowledge of the particular culture, which is where medical anthropology, biological anthropology, and other forms of anthropology in the contemporary world are moving towards. They are moving towards understanding the complexities of culture using the same insider knowledge, asking the people that they are talking to, not looking at the people from a distance, but asking the actual individuals who are impacted, affected, or even influenced by the same illness and disease. Medical anthropology started contributing as from 1960s. Where we also remember that during the 1960s, in fact, from 1940s, wars were happening. World War was happening. So through that, there were many social disturbances. There were many restructuring in the society, which caused illness and disease. Some people ran away, being displaced. That displacement meant that they had to change the environment. And according to medical anthropology, there are many factors that come with changing the environment, especially those factors that affect your health. Also, it emerged as a discipline that was and still dedicated to the service of improving public health of societies. Yes, improving public health. This is through engaging in research. This research can be ethnographic, which means you go to the people, you stay with them for days, You stay with them for months, asking important questions, questions that relate to improving their public health. Because we understand, for example, in South Africa, our public health system is very poor. Even if the research has been done by medical anthropologists, but the issue remains that there is less budget invested in terms of in improving the public health system. So for medical anthropologists to engage in this type of research, they ensure that poor nations improve their healthcare system to adapt to changes, because we understand climate change is happening. So there are many illnesses that are emerging. COVID-19 is an example. We don't know where it came from. There are many speculations. It's another example that the improvement of public health and the role of medical anthropologists in improving the same public health is vital. It's crucial. It's very important. Okay, since the mid-1960s, medical anthropologists have developed three major orientations. They've focused on three aspects amongst many aspects. Their focus has been on three major orientations. View populations as biological. We remember that's 101. We understand, we spoke about natural selection. Natural selection is a biological theory that was utilized within the scope of anthropology to understand the society. Understanding society in terms of it being a biology is a theoretical understanding. We use the biological understanding to view the society, which means natural selection, survival of the fittest. We can utilize it to understand economic difficulties in a context of economic difficulties, where social exclusion is created, where social marginalization is created, where poverty is also created. You see, when poverty is created, people go to poverty and others bahlala on the street. They stay on the street, which then becomes the process of natural selection, survival of the fittest. Those who have the skills, who have the expertise, who have the education, have the better chance of succeeding. So in the context of viewing population as a biology, it comes through those modes, viewing it in a biological manner, using social Darwinism's theory, or even understanding it through the lenses of Lamarck. Also, medical anthropology also views population as a cultural unit. Populations have ways of doing things, and these ways of doing things are shared amongst generations. In every home, they have a way of doing things. They have ways of approaching things. That's culture. Culture comes from that, comes from having a particular way of doing things. It's how you act, it's how you behave. So they view population as a cultural unit, that population consists of cultures. These cultures influence behavior. They shape how these particular individuals act, how they do things, how they interact in a context of illness and diseases. Culture is the main factor. For example, according to some journal, there has been a link between the biological aspect, which I spoke about in terms of you understanding if population is biological aspect. Here, in this case of medical anthropology, the biological side comes from the genes. Genes influence illness. The changes in genes, for example, from the hunters and gatherers society to a subsistence society or farming society, had a lot of illness. It was accompanied with a lot of illness. Diabetes is an example. Mental illness, because people still undermine the issue of mental illness because it does exist. So you see how medical anthropology use the biological and the cultural units to understand populations, because the biological is linked to genes, while the cultural unit is linked to what we do, how we behave. And the same behaviors determine what we eat, and what we eat can make us sick, can make us go ill. So you see, viewing a population as a cultural unit and viewing a population from a biological aspect is part of medical anthropology. The third orientation is the study of interaction amongst ecological systems, health, and human evolution. Yes, human evolution is associated with instabilities in health. It's linked also with ecological systems. Remember, the decrease in forest has an impact in agriculture. And an increase in population has an impact in agriculture, has an impact in human health, it has an impact in human evolution. Because ecologically, the environment is changed. People transforming the environment, staying closer together, cutting the trees, staying closer together is linked to evolution from the hunters and gatherers societies to modern societies. For example, hunters and gatherers societies only ate meat. They hunted, they didn't engage in agriculture. When the revolution of agriculture began, the transformation had to happen, the domestication of animals and the adaptation to the use of soil as the source. But with an increase in population, farmers had to incorporate new methods. Those methods included fertilizers, included GM foods. I'm sure most of you have heard of GM food, genetically modified food. It's also resulted in that. Genetically modified food are malnourished, so they are less healthy. They have an influence on the environment because of the pesticides that are being used. Same pesticides have an impact on your health. And then, therefore, it shows that human evolution has influenced our health. It has affected our health. Even if we can speak of the new methods of biomedicine that are being introduced, but the source that is making us sick, it has not been fixed, which is an increase in population, transformation in the ecological system, which influence on people's health and shows that indeed human evolution has been an influence. Okay, it is through these major orientations that medical anthropology offer a holistic understanding of health problems. Yes, holistic understanding. Understanding biological, understanding the cultural, and the interaction amongst ecological systems, health, and human evolution show the holistic understanding. Yes, holistically, yes, you understand this because of the diverse focus. If I say diverse, it's not focusing on one aspect, on cultural, but it also looks at the biological, the cultural unit, and the interaction amongst ecological systems. Okay, medical anthropologists are the first people to acknowledge that human health and wellness is biocultural meaning. It can't be understood in isolation. True, yes, it's true. Between you understanding what is making you healthy and what is making you sick, you need to understand that biocultural relates to biological and cultural factors that influence your health. They are biological and cultural factors that influence your health. For example, according to some journal here, I'll just check it out. The genes, for example, the ethnicity, Indians, Black Africans, because everyone is an African, Indians, Black Africans, coloreds, and whites have showed demographic differences in terms of what is making them healthy, what is making them ill. This was through looking at the intergroup interaction, looking at the gene, the biological, the cultural, and also the ecological systems. So they found that Indians are prone to diabetes, whilst Black Africans are prone to BP, whilst predominantly issues of cancer have affected the white nation. So for example, how the Indians have understood to endure a lot of sugar. So there's a lot of sugar involved in cooking, which is part of culture, how we do things, how we interact with each other, the intergroup relations. And the Black Africans use a lot of salt when they are cooking, including some of the colors. And when you look at these relationship between the biocultural, you can see that the biological aspects and the cultural aspects have a convergent evolution, which means they emerge and meet somewhere. I'm not saying that if you are an Indian, you cannot suffer from TB, or if you're a Karen, you cannot suffer from BP, I mean, or if you are you cannot have diabetes if you're an Indian, or if you're a Black African. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm trying to show you the relationship between the biocultural aspect, the factors, the biological factors, and the cultural factors that causes illness. Understand? Okay. So over the years, the biocultural aspect has been demonstrated on publications. These publications have drawn the scope of understanding the biological and the cultural aspects together, because the two have understood or have made us understand HIV, have made us understand the causes of HIV, the social, the cultural causes of HIV. Okay, that's an example. They value that such is to be understood through a variety of humanistic and scientific perspective. Yes, yes, humanistic and scientific perspective. So humanistic comes because of culture. Why this particular group is getting ill like this, or why is this particular group of culture, this cultural group gets ill. Those are ethnographic research that are done by anthropologists on the ground using ethnography. Ethnography is the major or is the main method of anthropology, because it allows you to understand an issue from both an emic and an ethic perspective, which means you go to the group using participant observation, asking questions, not only asking questions, but also looking at the people, understanding the people, observing the people, and also recording knowledge about the people. The biological comes because of the scientific perspective. We are still going to talk about the biomedicine at a later stage when we mention the approaches of medical anthropology, because biomedicine is the modern method of medicine that is used. It is a Western form of medicine. We all go to the clinic. We all go to see the doctors. We all, in fact, attend the biomedical clinic or biomedical anthropology. Okay. In the 21st century, medical anthropology encompasses the domains of individual experiences, discourse, knowledge, practices, and meaning, which means from the 1960s, the focus had advanced, which means medical anthropologists had changed the focus. It had transformed how it viewed, or it has advanced the approaching of its society. So what we were researching had changed, looking at the human experiences, looking at the discourse, looking at knowledge, looking at the practices around culture and meaning. The social, political, and economic relations of health and illness, the nature of interaction between biological and cultural. You see, the focus of medical anthropologists have become sophisticated, interpreting human suffering and health concerns in space and time. Okay, medical anthropology has inherited interdisciplinary ramification, which means this interdisciplinary comes because of biocultural or biological and cultural, which adopt the humanistic and the scientific approaches of understanding health. And undertaken toward understanding global health, which includes HIV and AIDS, mental health. Yes, mental health. Looking at the cultural aspects, we understand that many Africans have believed that mental illness is a Western thing, whilst it had already been with us for years. Because when mental health has been with us since the beginning of time, people do have stresses, people do have things that stress them, people do have things that push them to stress every day. So mental health becomes both a biological and a cultural link. Because for you to understand mental health, you need to understand the humanistic side and also understand the scientific side to group and know what is mental health. And also to understand HIV, you need to understand the cultural and the biological side, how it is passed through biological side, how people when interaction or when interacting through copulation pass HIV. That's a biological understanding. But looking at the cultural side, you can look at the aspects of intergenerational sex, looking at transactional sex, whereby intergenerational sex is an old person and a very young person. Or when looking at the transactional sex, we look at someone any age where they exchange money for sex, prostitution, or any other form of transactional sex. So looking at these, you'll understand the biological and the cultural. Okay, it also questions improvement of care and the health infrastructure. In the 20th century, just know that medical anthropology is now focusing on improving care and understanding the improvement of infrastructure, health infrastructure, especially in African nations where health is still impaired by poor infrastructure, lack of improvement in infrastructure. Okay, within the space or context of medical anthropology, anthropologists have developed a nexus of research which take interest in learning more about cultures and biological people and biology of people as well as their health. Yes, understanding human culture will mean you will understand the biological aspects as a medical anthropologist, because the two go hand in hand. For you to understand the humanistic, you need to understand the culture. For you to understand the scientific, you need to understand the biological aspects of human society. Okay, this is where transdisciplinary conversation comes from. If I say transdisciplinary, I mean there is a bridge between the cultural and the biological, the scientific and the humanistic. That is where this interdisciplinary enterprise comes from. I see that. Okay. Okay. Continuing. So anthropologists ethnographically study human not only through biological lens. Yes, I've mentioned that ethnography becomes the main method of medical anthropology and the main method of anthropology because it allows the researcher to go to the field. It allows the researcher to understand the people through interacting with them, through asking important questions, and through recording important information. So ethnography is an important aspect of both anthropology as a field in general and medical anthropology. So medical anthropology debates human health and wellness from many angles. They debate human health and wellness from many angles. If I say they debate human health and wellness from many angles, they use different approaches. Even if it's ethnography at some stage, others do use participant observation, others do use focus groups. This is through methodology. Methodology follows particular steps. So when someone speaks of a methodology, it speaks of a structured steps to follow when engaging in particular research. So the angles that we speak of that debate human health and wellness involve the use of methodologies. These methodologies allow researchers to utilize variety of social theories and health-related practices. If I speak of social theories, there are many theories. For example, marginalization can be used as a social theory of medical anthropology because marginalization speaks of social exclusion. It speaks of the marginalization between the society, the margins that are created by the structure of the society, where poor people get poor healthcare system, where richer people get better healthcare system, where the hierarchy is represented. So through them using these methodologies, they are able to uncover many of those aspects, the hierarchical elements that cause marginalization in health, the hierarchical elements that divide people through the process of social stratification. You understand social stratification? Others, if you don't know, social stratification is the division of people according to their earnings or social class. Okay, the field of speciality in anthropology finds relevance in the world of animals' health challenges. Yes, medical anthropology is relevant when there is illness, when there is diseases, when people are dying, or when people become ill. It becomes a tool to utilize different angles, methodologies, social theory, and health-related practices to uncover the issues that affect people. Medical anthropology provides a comprehensive approach to interpreting the human processes of falling ill. Yes, it provides a comprehensive approaches within all the fields of anthropology. If you want to deal with issues of health and diseases, you need to approach medical anthropology. It becomes a field of specialization. So you will not find it in many universities, but you would find it in some top universities. Okay. Okay. As I've mentioned before, you need to understand anthropology as a field for you to understand medical anthropology, because medical anthropology is a field, a subfield that emerges from medical anthropology. And just note that there are readings listed which will help you understand better, which will help you understand medical anthropology better. Okay. Okay, medical anthropology has over the years become a broadening field, interdisciplinary and applied. So it has become a broad field because of this transdisciplinary that has been happening, the use of humanistic, the use of scientific, which accompanies the use of a cultural and the biological aspect to understand what is making people ill, what is really causing illness, because you cannot treat a disease through biological without understanding the cultural cause, because the cultural cause can be a continuous factor which will cause people to continuously get ill. So for you to understand and come up with a solution in medical anthropology, you consider the cultural, which is the humanistic aspect, you consider the scientific, which is the biological aspect. This is through the use of different approaches, different theories, and so on. Okay, it's about how different people in different cultures or different groups look at illness, look at diseases, looking at the type of sickness that affects them. And it also looks at who they can turn to. That is the healthcare system. That is why they strive to improve in the same healthcare system, because of trying to improve people's health. Okay, one aims of medical anthropology is to entangle the closely interwound natural and environmental, human, biological, and socio-cultural threads, forming the behavioral and the conceptual network of human response to experience illness, which means the natural environment needs to be understood. The human biological aspect needs to be understood. The socio-cultural aspect needs to be understood. Natural environment is where you come from, it's where you are staying. Human biological makeup is your genes. As I've mentioned before, your genes can determine your illness because cancer can be inherited. So human biological aspect then needs to be understood from also a human biological and social cultural traits. Social cultural involves the social and the cultural causes of illness and diseases, as you cannot separate the two. In South Africa, for them to understand how TB began and how it was spread, they had to go to the mines where many of the miners were dying of TB. They had to see where they stayed, how they stayed, and who they stayed with, which involved the natural environment where they stayed, human biological. These are miners. These are predominantly Black Africans. The social cultural trends, the social and cultural, and what other activities do they engage in after mining? Miners have been known to have unprotected sex and have many partners, and to some extent, some are homosexual, which means they do indeed have sex with other men, which then has increased the risk of HIV. So for them to understand what causes TB, they had to understand the social cultural, because TB is linked with HIV. And for you to understand how TB is spread, you need to understand the social cultural, which involves their behavior after work, which involves also other aspects of culture. Okay, medical anthropologists emphasize the value of discovering how people classify and explain illness. Yes, they are concerned, the medical anthropologists are concerned with the value of discovering how people classify and explain illness. Yes, because people in different areas classify and define illness differently. Over the years, especially during 2004, where many people, youth in particular, passed away due to HIV, they had to understand how the people understood HIV and how they explained this illness. Because through that, they were able to understand that many countries like Uganda rejected condoms. They said this was a Western way of making them even more sick. It was a Western way of making them sicker. So for these to be understood, medical anthropologists then use ethnography again to discover how people classify and explain illness, in order for them to generate feasible solutions, crucial solutions, which will help them combat HIV, which many achievements have been recorded. Okay. So, medical anthropology is the study of human health and disease. If an MCQ comes, just know that it studies human health and diseases. It is the field of specialty that inquires human health and illness. It strives to improving public health. It ensures a holistic approach to understanding health, holistically, biological and cultural. Biological and cultural, holistically. If I say holistically, diverse, in a diverse way, in a diverse manner, in different angles. They never use one approach. They never use one approach. Yeah. Okay. It is a field that allows us growing anthropologists to study human health and disease, healthcare system, and as I've mentioned, it's repeating the same thing. Just understand that. Okay, these are communicable diseases that medical anthropologists have sought to research, because they want to understand both cultural and biological lab, biological genes, was cultural behavior, cultural the environment that people occupy. Cholera is an example. What is typhoid? I don't know what it is, but it does exist. Hepatitis is an STI. mostly it's called jaundice. Influenza falls under the families of COVID-19, which is flu, tuberculosis. So those are examples of communicable diseases that you can take from people that can travel through air. COVID-19 is involved there. Non-communicable disease, example, cardiovascular disease, heart conditions, though. Those are heart conditions. They are not communicable, which means you cannot give someone a cardiovascular disease. They are inherited or they are formed through a cultural behavior, what you eat, how you cook, what you do. So those are cultural aspects. Cancer, allergies and diabetes and so on. Okay. Yeah, so when the MCQ comes, it will need you to understand, define medical anthropology. It will need you to have a proper, in-depth understanding of medical anthropologies. You do not look at the page for 30 minutes cramming and then say you've got it. You need to go through the reading. After going through the reading, you will then be able to go back to the slides. You can do the reading once and then go to the slides. You will grasp the understanding because you need to understand the dynamics of medical anthropologists, the contextual nature of medical anthropologists, the transdisciplinary of the nature of medical anthropologists, where it considers the scientific and the cultural, where it considers the humanistic and the scientific. You see, for them to solve, understand, and critically engage in issues of disease, in issues of health, they need to come in a diverse manner. Medical anthropology embraces a wide range of theoretical perspective, as I've mentioned. Positivist is a scientific theoretic perspective. I can call it a perspective or a paradigm because it uses science. You use science, laboratory to understand illness. Critical and constructivist, which means critical can be when you understand the underlying factors of illness, the underlying role players that cause illness. Constructivism constructivism can also come through the construct, the social construct, the ideas that people share amongst themselves. For example, during COVID-19, people have been saying that it is a Western idea, it is a government that is trying to kill them. You see, those ideas are constructs. So those ideas need to be understood by medical anthropologists to change the behavior, to change the understanding of illness, to shape the understanding of illness and disease that affects people. Evolution also, they use that approach, evolution from hunters and gatherers to subsistence society or to agricultural society. There is a difference in health. People are getting weaker because of the malnutrition or malnutritious food that we eat. And normally, a potato is small size, not baby head size. So mostly GM foods have introduced bigger size, bigger portions, which also affect your health. So the evolutionary aspect of medical anthropology can be those lenses that are used to understand human evolution and how the human evolution has changed us, how it has made us weaker, how it has made us sicker, how it has changed our genetic makeup. Okay, and the ecological orientations, the changes in environment, changes in ecology. Changes in ecology can make us sick. Okay, on the MCQ, there will be a definition of health. Health, for us as medical anthropologists, health is a concern. So we need to understand what is health. So health is a descriptive and often culturally normative place. So understanding the descriptive and often culturally normative health, you need to also know that health can be individually defined. Because if someone you are asking, are you healthy? Are you okay? The person would say, I'm fine. I'm physically feeling good. I'm psychologically well. I'm socially well. You see, so for you to understand health, you need to be able to define it. Because if you don't know how to define it, then on the MCQ, it's a goodbye, it's a big no. So we are writing MCQs. So you need to recognize what you have studied. The ability to recognize what you have studied will come in handy. Don't cram because you will forget. And once you forget, it's a goodbye. Okay, illness also. Yes, understand illness, because for medical anthropologists, illness is a major objective, because illness comes when the infrastructure is poor, when public health is poor, when the environment people come from is poor. So illness can be a culturally structured personal experience of being unwell. Yes, a person knows when they are unwell. People recognize a person if they are unwell. They can see that this person is unwell. So it can be a social reality. It can be personal, because you can feel or you can be seen that you are not well, that you are ill. So know how to define illness. Disease also important. Yes, you need to know disease. Disease is an ethic or universally applicable and measurable entity. Yes, disease is something that we can see, that can affect anyone, that perhaps we can observe from a distance. An ethic can see, universally applicable, affects everyone. A measurable entity, we can record people who have a particular disease. We can see them through particular characteristics, dying, through perhaps going to the hospital, through being quarantined. Those shows that it is an ethic, universally applicable and measurable. You can see that person is sick. You can help a person that is sick because they will go and ask for help. Yes, it is a biomedically measurable lesion. So yes, you can measure it again, as I've mentioned at the bottom. It's concrete, it's scientifically factual. So you can see it, measure it, and sometimes you can even go to the lab and be able to analyze it. Okay, understand a disease. I cannot spend time trying to define a disease. So you need to go through that, understand the disease, understand illness. Okay, why is medical anthropology relevant? It's relevant because of global crisis. It's not the first time that we've had a global crisis. It's not the first time. We've had I think during the 1800s, they had the biggest outbreak of influenza. We might see influenza, which is flu, as something that is no longer killing people. But during those times, it killed a lot of people. The French, I think it was in France, especially, many people died. So through this global crisis, the relevance of medical anthropology becomes very, very creditable. We understand COVID-19, we understand Ebola, we understand HIV, we understand all the global crises that have affected us over the years. Okay, human population, okay, yes, human population comes with many problems. It requires people to adapt. It requires people to survive. An increase in population is accompanied with many illness. It's accompanied with people dying. It's accompanied with environmental issues. So where there is this crisis, medical anthropology becomes relevant because it will help people adapt and survive through this research that they do, through this different type of approach that they take when researching people, when trying to understand an illness and diseases using the biological and the cultural aspects. Okay, medical anthropology advances in interdisciplinary research. Again, interdisciplinary, which means it cuts across two disciplines, epidemiology or epistemology, you might just call it this. It's also deals with medical anthropology. So it's epidemiology and medical anthropology. So bridging the gap between the two, you need to utilize the biological and the cultural, using the scientific and the humanistic. Okay, we need to understand how disease and illness has affected people, how it's distributed through social groups, because different social groups in different locations or in different territories are affected by different illness. Ebola is still present. It's still affecting the country that the outbreak happened in. It's still affecting them, even though it's not as severe as years ago. But they've adapted. They've tried to survive through the research of medical anthropology, through understanding the cultural and the biological causes of that illness that is still killing people in North Africa. Okay, looks at factors that it's a double. Okay, students. Okay, it's a double. So we will be using this double. I will share the timetable. We'll use the double today, and then we'll use a double on Thursday. We don't use Monday. We don't use Wednesday. We don't use Friday. Okay, I'll share the timetable. Okay, so medical anthropologists take interest in studying health in different cultural groups. I've mentioned that because 5 major research, you need to remember 5 major research areas. MCQ requires you to remember the specifics. If you don't remember the specifics, then you haven't studied. And remember, you don't remember something you didn't study for. And also, for order to happen, you can put the emoji that is raising your hand so that it will be just smooth. Yeah. Okay, these are 5 approaches: ethnographic description of healing practices, ethnography using the ethic and emic perspective, going to the field, asking questions, understanding people, asking the people that are affected and impacted by that health, understanding the social groups that are affected by that health, listening to their views, recording their views, comparison of ethnomedical systems, comparing of ethnomedical systems. The comparison of ethnomedical systems can be done through ethnography, where you visit different groups, where you make sure the same different groups answer the questions, comparing their ethnic medical ideas to each other, which then gives you an explanatory model of health and sickness, which is the third bullet, explanatory models of health and sickness. So for you to understand the comparison of ethnomedical systems and understand the descriptions of practices, then the explanatory model will come in handy. The health-seeking behavior, we understand that on other research, men, especially young men, have been understood to be poor health seekers. They don't test, they don't go to the clinic, they rather maybe perhaps get ill or severely ill in order for them to start taking the illness serious, which is how the spread of HIV and AIDS has happened over the years. Okay, cross-cultural experiences are needed in order to learn from health experiences and conditions in different cultural groups. Cross-cultural experiences, which means cross-cultural experiences can be activated by you going to different cultures and trying to understand them individually, then trying to understand them as a group, which then will give you a cross-cultural experiences, because you will know this culture, know this culture, know this culture, and then matching them, you will then understand these aspects in conjunction. Okay, please make sure that you go through your readings, because I'm not going to be going through the readings here. I've read my readings and it's time for you to just go through the readings. Okay, there are 5 approaches in medical anthropology. Just know 5 approaches in medical anthropology. 5 approaches, biological. So how they approach health and illness is influenced by 5 aspects. So these 5 aspects determine how they view, how they understand, and how they treat illness and a particular disease. So, biological approach. Okay, Mandisa, I've just muted you. Okay, biological approach is guided by Western science assumptions. It's guided by the Western science assumption. That's biomedical approach, which means it's the kind of medical approach that we use on daily basis, seeing a psychologist, seeing a GP, seeing a specialist. So all those can be approaches of us as people understanding health, and for medical anthropologists, it's also their duty to use these approaches to understanding illness. Purely biological factors exclude psychological, they exclude environmental, and then they exclude social influences. So if we speak of biomedical, we speak only of biological factors. Genes can be an example. Okay. Also, the biological approach can provide insight in explaining the relationship between the evolutionary processes, human genes, and variations. I've mentioned to you that from the hunters and gatherers societies to modern agricultural societies, there's a huge margin in health. There's a huge difference in health. There is a huge variation because their genes were stronger. They were influenced by environmental factors. They were influenced by cultural factors, what they ate. They were influenced by behavioral issues, which is also cultural. They walked distances. They didn't have cars. They walked. They hunted their food. They also, even at a later stage, they also, okay, Kabelo, let me just unmute you. Okay. Okay, so I'll unmute you now. I'm almost done. So, yeah, so evolutionary processes are linked to health. They are linked to our health detriments. To make sure that everyone is on the same page. Okay. I will unmute for questions. I will need to finish here. Okay. Biomedical tends to ignore persons' account of experience and prefer to rely on laboratory. So as I've mentioned, lab, genes, those are scientific approaches. What if we speak of psychological, can be linked to cultural, can be linked to behavioral causes of illness. Okay. There's the second approach, ecological approach. So there was a biological approach, which is biomedical approach, and there's this aspect, which is the ecological approach. Okay, it refers to the relationship between organism and their total environment. Yes, our environment influence our health. They determine many aspects about us. Life expectancy is included in that process. Life expectancy is included in that process. A life expectancy for us, it has increased because of biomedicine, but it has also been challenged by the poor eating behaviors. For example, if you know there is this show which talks about super size and super skin. It shows that the people are eating poorer and poorer, more sugar, more processed food. This shows that the transformation in the environment and the shift from the hunters and gatherers to modern agricultural societies is a detrimental issue. It's an evolutionary crisis. It causes many diseases, it causes many complications for us as humans. The ecological aspect then comes in because of environmental transformations and adaptations. Environmental and adaptations. So for you to also understand that what is making us healthy, you need to approach it in an ecological, in a biomedical aspect. It is through industrialization that new illness came. I mentioned to you that the 19th century had a lot of issues for European nations because of health issues. How? Industrialization meant that there were transformation in the society, the industrial, the economic, and also many avenues of culture. People moved closer together, cities started to form. As kingdom fell, industry started to form. The formation of these early towns had a problem with strategic planning because people stayed too close to the industries, which then affects their health. To some extent, TB was born. There's also this this issue that's happened in England, plague, because of mice that were all over the place. Plague has started to happen. So the changes in society meant there was a change in culture, how people do things, what they did, shaping the ecology, changing the environment, moving people closer together, changing what people were eating, increasing their agricultural engagement. All these introduce diabetes, it introduced, or it perhaps exacerbated psychological issues, which is stress, because people had to work now, unlike relying on their small scale, or unlike them relying on their animals. They had to start the industrial aspect, going to work, waking up. They had real problems now, issues of monetary, issues of rent, issues of society changes. Okay, anthropology use ecology to understand diseases as they view populations as biological and cultural entities. We have mentioned that before. The third aspect is the ethnomedical approach. Ethnomedical approach. Ethnomedical approach are also known as local systems of indigenous beliefs and practices surrounding health and illness. Yes, ethnomedical approach, these are ethnic medical ideas, ethnic group medical ideas. If you talk of ethnicity, it's a group of people that share particular traits, cultural characteristics, or cultural traits, which then causes them to stay together, engaging in same cultural practices. So for medical anthropologists to understand illness in these small groups, they need indigenous knowledge systems. They need knowledge that is shared amongst groups, which that knowledge has saved these groups through the process of adaptation and survival for years. But there are many criticisms of biomedical anthropology that it has criticized ethnomedical approach. In many ways, it has discredited ethnomedical approach in many ways, because many African healers have been criticized through not referring people. When people were sick with HIV during the years, they were being sent to Izangoma, where they were told not to eat the pills. They were informed that the ancestors were angry. Those were the things that Izangoma of the time were doing. They were misleading people, which is not entirely wrong, or which does not entirely establish a wrong position for them, because there were good things about them, because they were healing things, such as small flu, such as the breaking of the bones. They were understood to be the healers of those social groups. With the coming of biomedicine, the discrediting of ethnomedicine started to happen as people started to move from ethnomedicine to biomedicine. But for medical anthropologists, they still strive to understand the same cultural causes and the biological causes of illness through ethnomedical approaches, because for them, the emic and the ethic perspective, which is going there, asking questions, interacting with the people, is still important to change how they understand illness, to change how they understand diseases. It becomes their interventions to understand illness and health and what people think about that and try to change that, because it is their role to transform and shape how people think. Okay, I won't be staying long here. Ethnomedicine has two basic goals: to examine health-related theories and knowledge that people inherit. Yes, to examine. To examine will mean to fully understand this knowledge, because some group, if you go to them, they will tell you that we normally heal the headache with water and maybe cutting the tree into half and staying alone in the room. That will help you. So those ethnomedical ideas have shaped a particular health-seeking behaviors. They have shaped how people understood what is affecting them or the disease that affects them. It has shaped them affecting illness and health in a context of the particular group. Medical anthropologists get sense of medical translation, not only by understanding the medical thinking of the group, but also the extent to comparing those ideas. As I've mentioned, their cross-examination or cross-cultural understanding comes from understanding this group and understanding the group and combining that understanding and comparing that understanding in order to derive the final aspect. Okay. So for you to understand approaches of medical anthropology, understand biological, biomedical, ethnomedical approach. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the class is about to end, almost there. Ethnomedicine refers to the inquiry that is used to study how members of different culture think about a disease. Yes, it's used as an approach, as an understanding, or as a tool to understand how and what people are thinking about a particular illness and disease that is affecting them. So for a medical anthropologist to come up with a solution, they need to do a cross-cultural examination, understanding individual groups, generating knowledge from individual groups, understanding from an ethic and an emic perspective, using participant observation. Okay. Almost done, 1 or 2. Okay, like the above outlined approaches, the ethnomedicine approach has ethnomedical systems. So understand ethnomedicine to understand ethnomedical systems. So the two are related, but they are different as well. Ethnomedicine approach gives birth to ethnomedical systems, which come in 3 forms. The theory of causality, which is etiology or etiology, which is a theory of causality. What causes the illness? What factors that cause this illness? Which factor is the dominant factor causing illness? Which factor shapes illness? A method of diagnosing based on causality theory. Yes. So which methods are used to diagnose? After understanding causality, you need to be able to diagnose and be able to understand the solutions which are part of therapy of the same diagnosis. So you understand causality, you understand a diagnosis, and then you are able to then prescribe the perfect diagnosis or the perfect solution for the diagnosis. And I said to you, explanatory model is important because it gives you the scope of understanding international public health research and how it embraces the same principles of ethnomedicine. It also acknowledges that every illness has one potential cause and description. Yes, every illness has one potential cause description, whether it's cultural or biological, but it forms parts of biocultural. It emerges from a particular factor, from a particular issue, from a particular environment, from a particular situation. So it becomes the long walk. So understand what is explanatory model, because explanatory model helps you understand ethnomedical approaches. A valid assumption is that adults of any culture will always have a good description of causality. Yes, they will have a good description of causality because of the biological understanding and also because of the cultural. Remember that some illness is hereditary. For example, cancer is hereditary. For example, some of the complications that children suffer from are hereditary. So it is then from that perspective that adults in any culture can be able to describe causality perfectly or better than any member of that particular group. People are considered as narrators of their health experiences. Yes, you are a narrator of your health system. It comes from adults understanding any culture or any illness that affects particular groups. If you narrate your own health, it means you understand the cultural cause. You understand the potential factor that exacerbates that illness. So understand this model, understanding it, please understand it, understand it, understand it. Yeah, I think here I'm moving to research has proved the following as attribution to ethnomedicine. So ethnomedicine is represented by identities, identity of particular groups, because the identity of particular group determines their culture, determines their behavior, therefore shaping their understanding of particular illness, shaping their understanding of a disease that affects them, unwellness that affects them. So that's where identity comes from. Objectively, number two, objectively, assess the remedy and the ability to produce amically desired effects. If you are involved in that group or are part of them, you will be able to understand this from an objective perspective, understanding this from the group perspective, from a worldview perspective. Lastly, it's identified the areas of convergence and divergence, the emic and ethic measures. The reason why we keep on talking about the emic and ethic is because ethnography can be emic and ethic, or can be ethic, or can be emic only, which means people, understanding people from an emic would mean you go to them, you interact directly with them. If it's ethic, then it becomes you not talking to them while trying to find answers, but it becomes you trying to ask them from a distance and not being involved in that process. Understanding ethnomedical beliefs allows researchers to become medical mediators. You mediate medicine through that because you will understand the cultural, biological, and the factors that align the same illness, which will become the role of explanatory model. Please understand that explanatory model has a role. It has a role in explaining illness. It has a role in sharing the understanding of illness from an ethnomedical perspective. Okay, so explaining explanatory method will be you understanding these bullets. Not only these bullets, go through your readings. Understand your readings. If you have questions, we have WhatsApp group. You can approach me through email or on the side. I will be able to answer you. Just know that the role of explanatory model is listed below. They are important. They are important. The fields of medical anthropology, as I spoke about, the approaches to medical anthropologies, the explanatory model I've explained. You need to understand the illness, the disease, the wellness. You need to understand what is medical anthropology. You see, after this team go through the readings, and then come back to understanding it. The trick to passing is preparing yourself in advance, not preparing yourself on the day. So kindly prepare yourselves. I think just know also that the explanatory model results in two categories, personalistic and naturalistic. Know what is happening there. Personalistic, when you understand illness from a person's perspective, from the aspects of natural forces, or from the ancestral force, or from the sorcerer's perspective. Naturalistic, understanding illness from the perspective of explaining illness from the natural, or from being resulted by the natural forces, environment causing you ill, the way you stay, how you stay, causing you to be sick. Okay, also understand explanatory model also explains the following. Know what the explanatory model explains. Don't just switch after explaining ethnomedical approach. Understand that there is explanatory model. It has categories. It also has explanations. Understand them. Understand each and every one. Our time is almost up. So I'm going to end this class here. Yeah, raise your hands if you, I'm going to stop sharing as well. You can raise your hand. Okay. If you have questions. Any questions? Anyone? Okay, so if you don't have questions, then I guess I will be sharing the timetable. Timetable will be shared on WhatsApp, and it will be shared through the email, so that everyone will understand, and so that we will be on the same page. So theme 1 is done. Go and study theme 1. Go and make sure that you study theme 1. Yeah. Okay, there's someone who's asking here. Okay. Okay, you can also try learn, not try learn 2022, so that you will be able to access marks. I mean, I'm saying marks, so that you'll be able to access the notes. Type learn 2022, learn 2022. I think we are done. I will share the recorded class with you through the email. Okay, thank you and goodbye. Go through the readings, go through theme 1.
Bye.